Welcome to TAD, the Autonomous Dealership podcast presented to you by 360 Auto AI.
Hey, welcome to the new episode of TAD, the Autonomous Dealer. And I'm Ron Scorado here at 360 Auto AI with Albert Thompson, the founder of ID Privacy, who is the backbone of our organization and is the one who came up with the idea for this type of agentic AI that we're going to talk about today. And our main focus is going to be on what AI can do for your dealership, in particular, what this AI can do for your dealership, and how it can solve your pain points, how it can solve your problems, what kind of expectations you might have from comparing one AI versus the other. And basically, what we're going to show you is why this AI is different from any other thing you'll see out on the market. And Albert, I think I want to start it off by kind of explaining the multiple types of AI that there are out there, starting with machine learning, then on to generative, agentic, and autonomous. I think the typical dealer is somewhat confused about AI. They've seen some things, they've heard some things. Basically, until you get into the back end and the nuts and bolts, you really don't know what to expect, right? And a lot of them sound the same, but there are definitely some unique and different aspects of every kind of AI, and let's explore them. Let's just start with machine learning because everybody talks about AI, and most of it is ML or machine learning. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Ron, and thank you so much. I'm really glad to be part of the autonomous dealer. It's exciting that you're building this journey. And I think that's a really great point, right? Because there's a lot of buzz out there today in the industry. A lot of people talking AI. I think it's just it's everywhere, right? Everybody has an AI. If you put a .ai in your company, you're now into AI, and I think that's exactly right. And AI has been around for a very long time. I mean, and many people don't actually realize that, right? And it really does start from a lot of things we are talking about, right? From like machine learning and understanding the difference of what that is, and understanding how that has essentially evolved over time into conversational or generative AI, and then ultimately conversational, and then we'll talk about all that. But essentially, machine learning, think of it like this, right? It's really process driven. Machine learning is where you can actually use computers to improve data sets, and it's really that's it at the core of it, right? It's experience through data rather than rules coded by humans, right? So when you think about machine learning, I always think about it as a process, right? You feed it data, and let's say it's vehicle service records. Let's say it's sales records. Maybe it's repair orders. Maybe it's customer behavior for intent. Machine learning ultimately is built to find a pattern, right? Maybe I can say, hey, for my service records, I want to see vehicle records for every 5,000 miles, right? Or let me identify a pattern for customers declining rates, right? That often buy with a discount, right? You're looking for certain patterns, and then ultimately, what machine learning is built to do is to model and then predict, that behavior, right? So if you think about ML, ML is really a data set that's built to find patterns, patterns to build predictions, and really it's at the core of AI, right? Because ML is ultimately how AI ended up learning, and we could talk about that later.
And I kind of try to break it down even more for dealers because sometimes it's something as base as press one for English, press two for Spanish, right? We hear that on the phones. You
Yep.
hear that when you call your bank and the voice, beautiful voice comes on and says, what can I do for you today? Do you want to check your balance or make a deposit or what is it? It's great at what it does and what it's programmed to do. Somebody has to say, do this and then do that, and after it does that, it ends. The task is complete. And it does that task very well, but it's very limited in that aspect. And then you just mentioned generative AI. So a lot of people are familiar with generative AI in the form of like ChatGPT or Midjourney. Generative AI
Right.
is creating something often, right? It's creating videos, creating answers to questions you have, creating blogs. That's the generative AI. But today, what we're going to be talking about is what these new technologies are that come to the table. And agentic AI is what we're talking about today. But even that can be something like, I would say you call it a wrapper, right? A
Yep.
wrapper around a machine learning. So agentic AI, I describe often in when I'm talking to a dealer is it's kind of like putting lipstick on a pig, right? It's
Yeah.
it's you can have an agent who sounds beautiful, sounds great, very friendly, conversant, but very limited in the task because the agent is hooked up to an automation. It's hooked up to a machine learning task. And it sounds great. It delivers that task, but it stops there. So now let's talk about what our whole podcast is about and what our whole operations are here with us as a sales agent for 360 Auto, for ID Privacy, as autonomous AI is taking that agent and doing what? You tell me, what does the autonomous nature of this offering do to help a car dealership?
Yeah. And I think before we answer that, right, I think I want to go back to what you were just saying a minute ago, which is there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of noise in the market, a lot of people talking about different types of systems out there, and you nailed it, by the way. If you actually look at the early 2000s to the mid 2015s, you did. You had a limited script based technology, and it was very limited robotic style, and then ultimately 2015 to 2022, 2023. You started to see, advancements into conversational, but again, really based rule process automations, right? RPA based automations, and then ultimately, the advancement into the agentic era, right? And this is why Auto 360 ID privacy is very, very different, right? Because what's in the market today, I basically say there's two camps, and there's probably more. There's probably a lot of in between. And again, I always try to say this in not a way to like say one's better than the other, but ultimately there is one better in terms of capabilities and technical advancements and what it's capable of doing. But depending on what it's built for, right? There's wrappers, and then there's real infrastructure and real agentic and autonomous AI. Okay. So there's um, a lot of what I call companies that are whitewashing AI. They slap a UI wrapper on top of a GPT and they call it an AI platform. And dealerships buy it thinking it's built for purpose AI, when in reality, they're just paying for API calls. It's very, very important to make this distinction, right? Because there's no dealership data control. That's number one, super important. There's no differentiation. Every AI vendor is going to essentially be reselling the exact same thing, right? There's no depth into the technology. They can't handle the workflows. They can't adjust those workflows. They can't set up different types of multi-agent orchestrations because they don't have any layers. All right, and AI, the way it's built today, is you have to have your infrastructure. You got to be able to have these layers that are built on top of each other to really have an end-to-end AI infrastructure. And that leads me to the second, camp, which is the camp of Auto 360 and ID privacy, right? Where we've essentially, we're not a wrapper, right? We're not whitewashing. We've spent the greater part of almost 2 years now building an actual complete private AI stack where the dealerships would actually own their own knowledge bases, where all the fine tuning would be secure and private and an encrypted environment. All the outputs remain inside of that encrypted environment, right? Where we have a translation layer to bring in all of the dealership systems, whether that's the DMS, whether that's the CRM, whether that's multiple API calls from different types of systems. That gives you the ability to have your own knowledge bases, which we built our own knowledge bases, so that we can really truly custom fine tune the models specifically based on those dealerships. And that really is the distinction and the main difference between what you would call a wrapper today and true agentic AI, because you really have to have the ability to have the machine learn and work and reason. It has to be able to reason what it's doing, and it has to be able to act on that reasoning. And that's the difference between having a chatbot and having a true digital service manager who can work for you 24/7.
So taking that into consideration, let's talk about that in a practical application for a car dealership. And I think maybe even if we start on the service side, because it seems that most dealerships see that that is their biggest pain point right now, or at least they only realize that until they learn what we can do with sales, right? But
Right.
for the most part, it all stems from one thing, the nationwide stat that for most service departments across America, and this is a generalized aspect of this, but across America, over 35% of all phone calls that come into a service department never get answered. And that's a
Right.
problem. They're stacked up 3, 4 deep in the line coming to talk to a service representative, and he's standing there and the phone's ringing and he's not answering because he's got customers in front of him that are explaining their problem and talking, just doesn't have time to pick up the phone. And guess what? That customer's in a hurry. Oh, I just wanted an oil change. Well, they're off to the Jiffy Lube down the street. They're just going to the next call that's going to answer and get me in right now, right? So,
Yep.
so that's why it's so important not to even think about the aspects of what happens after hours when there's nobody to answer the phone and people are working their shifts and they get home at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night. Service department's already closed, and they finally have a chance
Yep.
to make a call, and they're talking to a machine, and they don't know if anybody's going to answer. They don't know if anything, but gosh, it's pretty cool when the agent answers the phone at 11 o'clock at night and says, "Yes, Mr. Jones, I can get you in tomorrow at 8 a.m. Bring your car on in.
Mhm.
We even have a
Yeah.
shuttle service to take you to work," right? So that's cool. So tell me a little bit more about the service integration at a
Yeah.
dealership and the pain points that you've experienced talking to some of the fixed ops directors around the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where we see a lot of the of success. And Ron, you nailed it right on the head. Minimum 35 to 45% of service fixed ops calls go unanswered in a dealership. Um, and being able to just have the ability to have that AI agent always on 24/7 is a main differentiator. I mean, no hold times, consistent brand, consistent voice, consistent persona, being able to fine tune it to the way that the dealership needs to make sure that their image is presented to the market. All these things are critical. They're never going to have a bad day. They're not going to call off. They're not going to feel sick. And that's going to make a major impact at scale when you start thinking about all of the lost revenue that basically sat on the table. But when we think about that from a technology perspective, I want to touch on this because I think it's important. Because even the rappers, right, the ones that we were talking about earlier, um, they can answer calls, right? And they can say, well, Ron, we can answer calls too. We can be there 24/7. But so what's the difference, right? So why Auto 360? Why are you so different? Well, I think from a service perspective, and what we're seeing out there is that the requests of the dealers go much more deeper than the shallow request of just being able to answer my calls. Not just being able to answer my calls, but not and being able to actually do a lookup or to be able to actually book the appointment, right? That's simple stuff, right? Even